The Terminator, 1984, wasn't a studio blockbuster. It was a fever dream from a homeless director who sold his script for $1.
I warned you guys in 1984.
James Cameron lived in his car after breaking into an editing room. O.J. Simpson almost played the killer robot. A science fiction author sued for plagiarism and won. And Cameron called him a parasite who could kiss his ass. These are 16 facts about the low-budget film that launched Cameron's empire. Sold script for literally $1. James Cameron's agent hated the Terminator concept, so Cameron, who was living in his car at the time, fired him immediately. Rather than selling the screenplay to the highest bidder, Cameron made an audacious move. He sold the complete script to producer Gail Ann Hurd for exactly $1. The stipulation? Cameron must be allowed to direct his vision despite having only Piranha 2 on his resume. No studio would finance an untested director on a science fiction action film. Selling the rights for $1 to Hurd, who believed in the project, was Cameron's only path to the director's chair. The gamble paid off spectacularly. Cameron and Hurd married in 1985, though they divorced in 1989. Cameron's dollar investment became a $78 million gross. Conceived from fever dream in Rome. James Cameron experienced a fever dream while in Rome for the release of his directorial debut, Piranha 2. The Spawning in 1982. During his illness, Cameron hallucinated about a metal death figure coming out of a fire. The nightmare vision was so vivid and terrifying it wouldn't leave his mind. Cameron immediately began developing the concept after recovering. He wrote a 45-page treatment exploring this unstoppable mechanical killer sent through time. The fever dream became the foundation for the Terminator's iconic T-800 endoskeleton rising from flames. Cameron has repeatedly credited this illness-induced vision as the genesis of his most influential creation. Sometimes, as Cameron once said, nightmares are a business asset. The metal death figure haunting his sick mind launched a billion-dollar franchise. Cameron living in car after breaking into editing room. When Cameron arrived in Los Angeles to pursue filmmaking, he was literally homeless, living in his car and surviving on minimal resources. His situation worsened after his disastrous experience making Piranha 2, The Spawning. The Italian producers had seized creative control from Cameron during production, re-editing the film without his involvement. Furious, Cameron broke into the editing room, trying to salvage his vision. He got caught. This criminal act further damaged his already non-existent reputation. With no agent, no money, no credits, and now a breaking and entering incident on his record, Cameron had nothing to lose. The Terminator became his desperate all-or-nothing bet on himself. Living in a car gave him the reckless courage to demand directing rights. O.J. Simpson rejected as, quote, too nice, end quote. Orion Pictures co-founder Mike Medavoy strongly suggested O.J. Simpson for the title role. Simpson was a famous football star transitioning into acting during the early 1980s. Medavoy believed Simpson's athletic physique and growing screen presence made him perfect for the relentless killing machine. Cameron immediately dismissed the idea. His reasoning: Simpson came off as too nice of a guy. Cameron felt audiences wouldn't believe Simpson as a merciless cyborg assassin. Simpson's friendly, charismatic public persona worked against him. The role required someone who could embody inhuman menace. This casting decision has become darkly ironic given Simpson's later murder trial. Cameron's instinct about Simpson being too nice became one of history's most unfortunate quotes. It's now impossible to imagine anyone except Schwarzenegger. Schwarzenegger talked his way into the villain role. Arnold Schwarzenegger was originally approached to play Kyle Reese, the heroic soldier from the future. Cameron scheduled a lunch meeting to discuss the Reese role. However, Schwarzenegger kept telling Cameron how he thought the T-800 should act. The methodical movements, the inhuman speech patterns, the relentless pursuit. Cameron had a revelation during the conversation. Schwarzenegger wasn't describing how to play Reese. He was auditioning for the Terminator. Cameron asked if Schwarzenegger would consider playing the villain instead. Schwarzenegger initially resisted, having just found success playing the heroic Conan the Barbarian. He worried being the antagonist would damage his career. Eventually, Schwarzenegger agreed. His limited dialogue and mechanical performance became iconic. Schwarzenegger's instincts about the character were so strong, he talked himself into a different role entirely. Harlan Ellison sued for plagiarism. Science fiction author Harlan Ellison, who wrote Repent Harlequin, Said the TikTok Man, and Star Trek's City on the Edge of Forever, noticed striking similarities between the Terminator and his 1964 Outer Limits episodes. Specifically, Soldier, which featured two opposing soldiers sent backward through time, one good and one evil. Also, Demon with a Glass Hand, about a time-traveling android protecting humanity. Ellison filed suit against Hemdale Productions and Orion Pictures for plagiarism. The opening sequences of both the Terminator and Soldier showed future warriors arriving on contemporary streets. Ellison heard during production that the script sounded like his work. He requested to see the screenplay. Hemdale refused. Ellison snuck into an advanced screening disguised as Leonard Maltin's assistant. After watching the completed film, Ellison determined sufficient similarity existed to pursue legal action. Cameron's quote removed from Starlog magazine. The most damning evidence in Ellison's lawsuit came from Starlog magazine. Cameron gave an interview about the Terminator before its release. When asked where he got the idea, Cameron reportedly said, "I ripped off a few Outer Limits segments." A friend of Ellison's visited the set and claimed Cameron admitted he'd ripped off a few of Ellison's short stories. However, this quote does not appear in the final published Starlog interview. According to Ellison, Cameron's assistant, or producer Gail Ann Hurd, contacted Starlog demanding to see the interview before publication. The magazine editors were allegedly pressured to alter the piece, removing Cameron's acknowledgement. Starlog's editor contacted Ellison to provide the original unedited interview. This suppressed quote became crucial evidence proving Cameron knew about the similarity. Settled out of court for undisclosed amount. The lawsuit never reached trial. Hemdale Productions settled with Harlan Ellison out of court. The settlement amount remains disputed. Sources report anywhere from $65,000 to $400,000. Ellison received payment in installments plus an unusual credit on all future releases. The acknowledgement reads, "With acknowledgement to the works of Harlan Ellison." The vague phrasing doesn't specify adaptation or inspiration, just acknowledgement. The credit was added only to home video releases, not theatrical prints. Additionally, the settlement included a strict gag order preventing Cameron and other Terminator parties from discussing what happened. Ellison claimed if Cameron had simply approached him beforehand and credited him, Ellison would have allowed Cameron to use his ideas for free. The secrecy made Cameron a prisoner of the settlement. Insurance company forced Cameron to settle. James. Cameron wanted to fight Harlan Ellison's plagiarism claims in court. Cameron believed the accusations were baseless and opportunistic. However, Orion Pictures Insurance Company refused to let Cameron fight. They told Cameron if he fought Ellison and lost the suit, they would come after Cameron personally for all damages. Cameron had no money at the time. He'd just sold his script for $1 and was emerging from homelessness. He couldn't afford to risk personal liability for potentially hundreds of thousands in damages. The insurance company forced Cameron to accept the settlement against his will. Cameron has rarely spoken about the case due to the gag order, but in 2014 finally expressed his fury about being coerced into surrendering. Guerrilla filmmaking without permits. Cameron's $6.4 million budget couldn't afford location permits, so he resorted to guerrilla filmmaking. The production crew and actors would quickly arrive at a location, rapidly shoot the scene, and leave before police arrived. As a result, some people visible in shots are actual everyday citizens completely unaware they're in a movie. Cameron even used this tactic for reshoots, once calling and waking Arnold Schwarzenegger at 3 a.m. to meet him at a location already in full Terminator costume to quickly reshoot a scene. Schwarzenegger would arrive at 3 in the morning, perform the scene, and disappear before authorities arrived. The run-and-gun style borrowed from indie and exploitation films saved thousands of dollars while providing authentic Los Angeles grittiness studios couldn't replicate. Highway patrolman almost stopped final scene. Cameron used guerrilla tactics to film the very last scene where Sarah drives off into the desert. He waited for heat to rise until ripples could be filmed on the highway. A California highway patrol officer appeared and demanded to know what they were doing. Producer Gail Ann Hurd quickly improvised, convincing the patrolmen they were working on a UCLA student film project. The officer, believing they were college kids shooting a class assignment, allowed them to finish. Had Hurd not fast-talked her way through the situation, the iconic final shot, Sarah pregnant with humanity's future, driving into an uncertain future, would have been lost. The entire production depended on creative lying and quick thinking. Laser sight required external power supply. The AMT long slide pistol modified with a laser sight, visible throughout the film and on the poster, required elaborate workarounds because diode lasers didn't exist yet. The high power requirement meant the helium neon laser used an external power supply that Schwarzenegger had to activate manually. Both non-functioning and functioning versions of the prop were created. The working laser couldn't be self-contained within the gun. Schwarzenegger needed to trigger the external power pack while performing, adding another layer of technical difficulty to every scene. Weapon modifier Ed Reynolds from Surefire states his only compensation for creating this iconic prop was promotional material for the film. No payment, just credit. Reynolds created movie history for free. $6.4 million, budget grossed $78 million. The Terminator was made for a modest $6.4 million, incredibly low for a science fiction action film, even in 1984. For context, Ghostbusters' special effects budget alone was $5.8 million that same year. Cameron shot entirely on Los Angeles locations rather than expensive studio sets. He leaned on practical effects, miniatures, stop motion, and animatronics instead of costly optical effects. Stan Winston's Terminator endoskeleton was mostly seen in brief flashes and clever lighting. The film defied low pre-release expectations, topping the United States box office for 2 weeks. Final worldwide gross, $78.3 million. The 12-to-1 return on investment made it 1984's highest-grossing film relative to budget. Limitations became strengths. Lance Henriksen kicked door, open with gold, foil teeth before James Cameron's pitch meeting with Hemdale Film Corporation producers. Actor Lance Henriksen decided to make an impression auditioning for the Terminator role. Henriksen arrived wearing a leather jacket with gold foil affixed to his teeth. He kicked open the door and acted as the title character without warning. The secretary was so startled, she dropped her typewriter onto her lap. Henriksen's performance was believably terrifying, exactly what Cameron wanted for the role. However, after Schwarzenegger joined the project, Henriksen was offered Detective Hal Vukovich instead. Henriksen's aggressive audition didn't win him the lead, but it demonstrated the commitment Cameron demanded from collaborators. The kick door became legendary proof of Henriksen's dedication to Cameron's vision. Orion had no faith and held one press screening. Orion Pictures did not believe the Terminator would perform well at the box office and feared negative critical reception. The studio had so little confidence they held only one press screening for the entire film. At an early screening, the actors' agents insisted producers should screen the film for critics. Orion reluctantly agreed to a single showing. The studio expected the film to disappear quickly. Cameron was mostly left alone during production because nobody cared about the low-budget project. When Hemdale's John Daly wanted Cameron to cut the striking final factory images, Cameron responded, "Fuck you! The film isn't over yet!" The studio's lack of faith gave Cameron creative freedom. Nobody interfered because nobody thought it mattered. They were catastrophically wrong. Film score in Unusual, 13/16. Time signature composer Brad Fiedel created the Terminator's iconic haunting theme on a Prophet 10 synthesizer, using the unusual time signature of 13/16. This arose when Fiedel experimented with rhythms and accidentally created an incomplete loop on his sequencer. He liked the herky-jerky propulsiveness of the mistake so much he kept it. The unusual time signature gives the theme its unsettling, mechanical quality. It feels slightly off, never quite resolving. Fiedel also created heroic music for when Reese and Connor escape the police station. Cameron rejected this theme entirely, believing it would lose audience excitement. The cold, relentless synthesizer score perfectly matched the Terminator's inhuman nature. The accidental 13/16 loop became one of cinema's most recognizable themes. He conceived it from a fever dream while sick in Rome, sold the script for $1 while living in his car, got sued by a science fiction author and forced to settle, shot without permits at 3 in the morning, and made a 12-to-1 profit despite the studio believing it would fail. The Terminator proved low-budget guerrilla filmmaking could revolutionize Hollywood. Subscribe for more stories about impossible successes.